Jim and Bryce had been best friends since high school swim team. They went to the same college, were in the same fraternity, and lived near each other in a Denver suburb. Despite their friendship, there was competition between them, especially in swimming, but also in card games, tennis, and table football. Denise met Jim and Bryce when they were sophomores. She was and remains a very sexy woman, more sexy than beautiful, but attractive enough to turn on almost any man. Denise is a tall brunette with brown eyes, a graceful figure, and, in Bryce's opinion, perfect breasts. Like Bryce, she is an ambivert. Denise became the only source of tension between the friends, as both fell in love with her, and it was not like their usual competition. Denise dated Jim and Bryce separately, probably 3 times each, during college. Bryce never got beyond the tender caresses that convinced him of the attractiveness of Denise's breasts, and he's sure Jim didn't get any further, although they never talked about it. Denise dumped them both and started dating a guy named Andy, who had the body of a footballer. Bryce wanted to hate Andy, but after getting to know him through community service, he realized that he was a good guy. Although Jim never dated Andy, he expressed disdain for him throughout college because he was dating Denise. Bryce was known for his calmness under pressure, which served him well in college. He saved his fraternity twice and Jim once by acting rationally when others lost control, earning himself the nickname Calm Hand Bryce. Bryce never had a long-term relationship in college, unlike Jim, who met Gabriella at the beginning of his 3rd year. Gabriella is a real volcano of passions, smart and funny, able to swear and joke no worse than men. Bryce understood why Jim was attracted to such an extroverted woman, and although Gabriella was not his type, they had always gotten along well. Jim and Gabriella fell in love in college and got married 2 months after graduation. Bryce was a best man at Jim's wedding and organized the bachelor party, where he saved Jim from having sex with one of the dancers, as he knew that this could end his relationship with Gabriella on the eve of the wedding. The wedding and reception were the most luxurious Bryce had ever been to. Gabriella's father is a famous lawyer with family capital, and since Gabriella was his pride and only daughter, no expense was spared on the wedding. Jim didn't want to follow in the footsteps of his accountant father or lawyer father-in-law and became an insurance agent for a mid-sized firm in Denver. He specialized in home and small business, and through his intelligence and industry, achieved success. Bryce has always been strong in math and science and graduated from college with a master's degree in robotics through a combined undergraduate and graduate program. He always had an entrepreneurial bent, and just a year after starting in the field, he decided to start his own consulting business. At a week-long entrepreneurial seminar that Bryce attended as a vacation a month before leaving his job, he unexpectedly met Denise. She also participated in the seminar, and they immediately recognized each other. She told him straight out that he looked better than he did in college, although Bryce didn't think he had changed, but he didn't argue. He didn't need words to express his opinion of her appearance. His gaze did it for him. Yes, she was amazing. She was very open about her life and expected the same from him. She realized that her sweet football player boyfriend, Andy, wasn't the right person for a long-term relationship and broke up with him gently during her last month of college. Since then, she has worked in event planning and, like Bryce, wanted to start her own business. Their few years of maturity and experience since briefly dating in college, combined with the atmosphere at the seminar, accelerated their relationship. They attended every class together and were inseparable during meals and in the gym and pool, where Bryce could admire her gorgeous body, including those world-class breasts. On the 3rd evening of the seminar, they went dancing after dinner. By the first slow dance, they were both on fire. By the end of the second slow dance, they both decided to go back to the hotel. In the elevator to her room, they touched each other, and within 5 minutes of the door closing behind them, they were both naked. When they came to, they were lying next to each other, giggling, moaning, and purring. They had another round in the middle of the night, and when they woke up the next morning, undoubtedly the 3 best sex of his life up to that moment, and, if she was not an award-winning actress, then her best, or almost the best too. Their sexual energy helped them work together on a project that had to be completed on the last day of the workshop. The winning team, most teams consisted of 4 participants, will receive a refund of half the cost of participation in the workshop. Denise and Bryce worked as well together on the project as they did in bed, and won, making both believe they worked well under pressure and worked well together. When I say that our relationship developed at great speed, I am not joking. Within 2 weeks of finishing the seminar, she moved in with me, and we had sex at any time of the day or night in every place imaginable. 4 months after she moved in with me, we got married. Of course, Jim was my witness. Jim was very surprised when he saw Denise and I moving in together shortly after she moved in with me. He told me many times how lucky I was. When he gave the toast at the wedding, he called me the luckiest guy in the world to marry the amazing Denise. Luckily for him, he saw Gabriella's reaction from the corner of his eye and added, "Except me, of course," earning a good laugh. Since Denise and I paid for our wedding ourselves, our parents wanted to help, but we refused, since they still had to provide for our siblings' education. It wasn't luxurious, but it was perfect for us. By the time we were 32, Jim and Gabriella had 2 daughters, aged 7 and 5, and Denise and I had twin boys, aged 5. Jim and Gabriella seemed to be happy, although, true to her nature, Gabriella would sometimes flare up at him, especially in matters of child care. She was loving but strict, and he was too lenient. Gabriella looked almost as good as she had in college, gaining maybe 3 to 5 pounds, but otherwise unchanged. Denise and I seemed happy too. I certainly was, as she was the only woman I had ever loved. She looked exactly the same as when I met her at the seminar. We both had our own businesses, which we ran from a good-sized home we bought in a nice area with excellent schools. I worked full-time in robotics consulting, and Denise averaged about 20 hours a week in event management, although sometimes it was 40, other times 0. Jim provided us with the best business, health, and home insurance policies with the most generous estimates. Although I truly love Denise, I am far from a perfect husband. I need to admit 2 cases of betrayal. The first time was when Denise was pregnant with twins, and the last thing I wanted was to be away from her. But my most important client had their most important project in Boise, Idaho, and I had to be there for a week. I missed Denise very much, which led to long phone conversations, but also to something else. I stayed in a so-so client-friendly hotel that only had one feature, a large swimming pool. After talking to Denise one evening, I decided to go swimming, my favorite exercise and relaxation. It was late when I entered the pool area, so late that the pool was officially closed. Since it was in a separate wing of the hotel, and it was dark without any lights on, I went in anyway. Perfect time for a night swim, I told myself, given that the conversation with Denise had left me very excited. I took off my panties and dove into the water. I had just finished 1 lap and was about to turn for the second when I heard laughter. At the same moment, I saw a figure in the water in a part of the pool that I couldn't see well when I dived. I stopped. I determined that it was a woman. Only her head and neck were above the water. "Oh, damn, I'm so sorry," I said. "I didn't know anyone was here. Close your eyes and I'll come out and put on my suit." "No need to worry," she laughed. "I don't have a swimsuit either. I don't mind swimming nearby. It's really dark here." "Okay," I said, shrugging. We swam slowly for a few laps, talking. It was clear that she was a little tipsy, although not drunk. She was very daring and brave. I quickly learned that she had been away from her husband for 10 days and had to spend 2 more days without him, and swimming was supposed to be her salvation. For some reason, I told her about my condition too, especially after just talking to Denise. She began to float on her back. Although there was almost no light, there was enough, in certain places along the pool, to see that she was small, with a nice, tight body. This did not help alleviate my condition at all. We continued to talk, me still swimming on my stomach, usually breaststroke, while she continued swimming on her back and was not bothered by me looking at her while she did it. After about 20 minutes, when her intoxication had apparently not abated, but her libido had increased, she stopped at the shallow end and stood up. Her entire upper torso was above the water. I stopped swimming when she said something about asking my opinion on some trivial matter as she approached me. She quickly took the last 2 steps and found herself in my hugs and grinned. I didn't move away. He just stood there and grinned too. I'm 6'2", and she couldn't have been more than 5 feet, no more than 100 pounds, even wet. "What are you doing?" I asked, obviously a rhetorical question. "I'm seeing if we can help each other," she said. "Will you come up to my room?" We put on our robes. When we left the pool area, I finally saw her in the light, at least in her robe. She was blonde with a pixie cut and really cute. When we entered her room, she immediately took off her robe, and I was impressed by her nice hips. The next morning, I finally found out her name. It was Sheila. "I'll be fine by tonight and looking forward to the next episode," she chirped cheerfully with a big smile on her face as she finished applying her makeup. Dressed in a summer dress with subtle eyeshadow and lipstick and 4-inch heels, she really looked good. "Can we meet for dinner?" I asked. "Sure. How about 5:30? She said, applying the finishing touches of makeup to her eyelashes. "Why so early?" I asked. Sheila smiled broadly in the mirror and laughed. "We need time for our food to digest, and I expect to spend the whole night with you because I have to leave for the airport at 6 a.m. tomorrow." "Fair," was all I said as I watched her emerge from her rooms. I felt a few remorseful feelings at work that day, but the experience with Sheila was so different from the one with Denise that I was able to separate it out. I talked to Denise right before dinner, so by the time I saw Sheila again, I was on edge. We had a lot to talk about at dinner, so the conversation didn't stall. She was a very interesting woman with a provocative personality and manners. After an hour of leisurely walking after dinner, holding hands with no one around to recognize use, we were both ready for action. "It was really fun. I loved it," were her parting words as we briefly kissed goodbye. "Yes, you are right," was my smiling reply. "Thank you. You truly are an amazing woman." This brought a big smile to her face. It wasn't until I was on the plane coming home 2 days later that I started to feel guilty. I justified it by saying that it was a completely different experience, that she was someone I would never see again, and that it was completely recreational and biological for both of us. All this was true, but not an excuse. After caring for Denise and giving her all the care I could for the rest of her pregnancy and at least the first 6 months of the twins' lives, I essentially forgot about my 2 nights with Sheila. My second experience with cheating was completely different. I was on a business trip again, this time to San Francisco, shortly after the twins' 2nd birthday. I had a long but very economically successful day. I had already spoken to Denise on the phone, but our conversation was short because the children were misbehaving and her parents were visiting. Although she was happy about my success, she really wasn't able to celebrate it with me. Too much active to sleep, I went to the hotel bar. The hotel was very posh and the bar was packed. From the corner of my eye, I saw perhaps the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in person. Even though my confidence with women had increased significantly after winning the attention of the hot and passionate Denise, and had also been strengthened by my experience with Sheila, I simply gave her an appraising glance and said to myself, "Not my thing. League." Not that I was going to try to seduce her, because after Sheila I had decided that she would be my only extramarital affair. I periodically noticed that almost every guy in the bar approached this living dream, but no one left with it. The crowd began to thin out a bit when I felt someone's hand touch mine. I turned around and was amazed at the sight in front of me. She looked even better up close, with a face straight out of a cosmetics ad and a body straight out of a Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. Or better. "Can I ask you a favor?" she whispered, pretending to laugh and touching my shoulder with her hand. "All I can do is say yes or no, so ask away," I replied, smiling. "You can pretend you know me. My name is Sherry. There are 2 guys I want nothing to do with. They're harassing me, and don't seem willing to take no for an answer. I told them I'm with you, so that you can pretend it is so, she said quietly, occasionally letting out fake, demonstrative laughter. Of course, I replied. I'm Bryce. What are you drinking? Just a soda. I'm at work, she replied. I ordered a soda, looked over to where she was sitting, and noticed two overweight, not very attractive guys who seemed upset, and then started to leave the bar. Don't turn your head too obviously, but it looks like your friends are leaving, I said. I hope I helped. Oh, you sure helped, she said, smiling. Her soda arrived, and she took a sip. Then, while talking to me, she looked in the mirror behind the bar and saw the two guys she wanted to avoid actually leaving. You don't have to leave now that they're gone, do you? I asked. I have a reason to celebrate, and no one to celebrate with me. What are you celebrating? She asked. The largest advance I've ever received on a contract and the highest profit I've ever included in one, I replied with a glint in my eye. Well, this is indeed a reason to celebrate, she said, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. I was now officially in a good mood. We continued talking. She was very friendly, but not physical, when I noticed that her drink was empty. Another soda? I asked. Thank you. She smiled. After ordering, I remembered her comment when I ordered the first one. You said you drink soda because you're at work. What's your business? I'm a high-paid companion, she replied light-heartedly and quietly. I nearly choked on the rest of my scotch and soda I had just swallowed. I think I did a good job. What do you mean, highly paid? Was all I could ask, although it wasn't because I was considering using her services. That means two things. One is that I charge $200 a night, smaller amounts for shorter stays with a $400 minimum. Second, I'm very picky. Just tonight, I turned down 6 guys willing to pay the cost, including the 2 fat guys you scared off. They were willing to pay $2,000, was her calm response. Do you like your job? I asked, not finding a better question. Very much. I love sex and meeting new people. If someone doesn't like it, they shouldn't be provocative. She answered quickly, then laughed. Do you work for an agency or are you a freelancer? I'm a freelancer. I don't need anyone's help finding clients, especially in top hotels. She grinned, almost as if she was offended by the question. Have you ever paid for sex? She asked. Except for the exotic dancer at my bachelor party when I was 21 and single. I laughed, remembering Jim's bachelor party before his wedding. I slept with the dancer I prevented for Jim. Why do I meet your standards? As long as you're married and don't live in the city, yes, she replied. Why does this matter? I asked. Local or single guys can be so annoying, especially local and single guys, she replied, with an air of disgust. They want a date after that. I get all the sexual satisfaction I need at work, and I'm not ready to start a family, so I'm not dating. The whole time we were talking, I admired her body. With the exception of Dennis's breasts, every part of her body seemed better than any part of any other woman I had ever seen in person, and she radiated enough sex appeal to drown an elephant. My interest quickly grew. Sherry, I'd love to hire you, but I'm not going to write a check and I only have about $300 in cash, I said, looking at her intently. Do you have a bank card? She asked. Of course, I replied. And there is enough money in the account? Yes, I have, I said. The hotel has an ATM right behind the bar that will dispense $400. I'll spend the night with you for $100. You can get the rest of the $400 tomorrow morning since the ATM can be used every 8 hours. She said, biting her finger. He gave her the key card for my room. Number 211. You'll be up after visiting the ATM, Sherry. She winked at me mysteriously and left. He already had $4.6 in cash, so I paid the bar tab in cash, went to the ATM, and then went upstairs. I won't describe sex with Sherry in detail because words can't describe it. All in all, it was a different world experience. Needless to say, she fulfilled her guarantees, and after a morning shower together, I invited her to breakfast. After ordering, I got the remaining $400 from the ATM and discreetly handed it to her under the table while we ate. After we finished breakfast, leaving, she asked, "I left you happy, client Bryce." "More than happy. I'm delighted," I replied, smiling. "You have one problem, Sherry." "Which one, Bryce?" she asked with a questioning look on her face. "You take too little," I answered with a big smile. She liked it. We shook hands goodbye because we were in public and a kiss would have been inappropriate. I was able to justify the Sherry incident even more easily than the Sheila incident because it was just a matter. Plus, Sherry taught me a little trick that I used on Denise when I got home that made her go crazy. This may not have been the smartest decision immediately after returning from her deployment, because when she came to her senses, she asked, "Where did you learn that?" I'm not sure she believed my explanation. I just came across this in an article in some magazine, but she never complained when I used it on her. So it's clear that I'm not perfect in terms of fidelity, although I must admit that I've had seduction attempts made on me at least a dozen times in Denver, including by some beautiful but flawed women, even when Denise was away, and I've never even did not make contact with any of them. This brings me to Jim and Denise. I noticed the signs at least 4 months before the main event, but I ignored them, chalking it up to just a platonic crush Jim had had for Denise since college. Signs included Jim and Denise having fun at parties, dinners, or casual get-togethers, having a second cell phone in Denise's office — both of our offices were at home — which I had never heard of before, Denise's unusually long meetings with clients while I was with the children, calls to our house that were not answered when I was away on business, although they then returned calls relatively quickly, little love notes from Denise on my desk. Denise sometimes took a shower as soon as she got home, and much more frequent changing of the sheets on our bed. Our sex life, be it frequency or intensity, has not deteriorated one iota, nor has her non-sexual affection for me. Perhaps this is what caused me to rationalize other signs over the course of several months. There was no one event that prompted the installation of 6 advanced HD cameras in my home while Denise and the children were visiting her parents for 2 days. Rather, it was a culmination of events and my awareness that they had begun to distract me. The cameras were motion-activated and were set to transmit images and sound in real time over the internet. The data was easily retrieved using a password when I turned on my laptop, but was stored in the cloud even if my computer was turned off. I hadn't really thought about what I would do if my suspicions were true, most likely because I had convinced myself that I was paranoid and that the cameras would just prove it to me. 2 days after Denise returned from her parents, I had a trip to Colorado Springs, only an hour away. However, I told Denise that it would be in Casper, Wyoming, about 4 hours away, but close enough that she wouldn't suspect that I had decided to drive there. I told her the trip would take 4 days, when in fact it was only planned for 2, although I intended to stay 2 more if necessary to assuage my suspicions. The first night and the next morning after Denise returned, we made love twice, and it was really great. However, on the eve of my departure, she refused me. This was very unusual for her, which made me even more suspicious. The first night I was away, there were thunderstorms across much of Colorado, with the heaviest expected in the Denver area. While I was watching TV in my hotel room, I had my laptop on, and all the camera images were displayed simultaneously on a split screen, but the sound was muted. I called Denise and the boys right before the boys went to bed, and could actually watch all 3 of them talk to me. Denise was very sweet when she said goodbye. Once the boys went to bed, Denise changed into sexy lingerie. "Oh shit," I muttered under my breath. She was in the bathroom for a long time. I didn't see what she was doing there because I didn't have a camera there, but I could imagine. When she got out, she went to check on the boys, and apparently found them asleep because she then went to her office. From a locked desk drawer in her office, she pulled out a second cell phone that she had accidentally left in plain sight on her desk the day I saw it. I immediately turned on the sound. "Hi, honey, it's me. The boys are sleeping, so come here quickly," Denise said with a sly smile. The call was not made to me. Jim arrived 10 minutes later, about the time it took him to get from his office, and parked in the driveway. He ran from his car to the front porch of our house holding an umbrella and received a big kiss from Denise as he entered. Jim took off the wet part of his clothes on the first floor and then followed Denise upstairs. pinching her beautiful round ass on the first few steps. The rest of the stairs no longer had a camera covering the action. When Jim walked into the bedroom, he stood there smiling as Denise undressed him. He smiled. She giggled. They hugged, touched each other, with Jim clearly enjoying her breasts, and then the worst thing that could happen happened. "I love you, Jim." "I love you too, Denise," followed by a passionate kiss. I almost stopped watching. Luckily, I didn't do this. 5 minutes later, Jim said, "I need to get back to the Italian tyrant. When is the robot coming back from Casper?" I guess I was a robot. Something Jim never called me to my face or in my presence. "Thursday evening, can we have another meeting on Wednesday evening?" Denise giggled. Well, at least she didn't say anything bad about me, I thought to myself. While Jim was in the bathroom, I heard the shower turn on, and then saw him get out and get dressed, exchanging comments with Denise about his body parts and sex. Jim was almost fully dressed when the disaster occurred. A bright light came on my bedroom camera screen, and Denise was thrown off the metal headboard and off the bed. Jim fell but quickly got up. Lightning apparently struck the house and apparently traveled through the headboard and into Denise's body. Jim rushed to Denise, but she was unconscious. A fire started in the sheets and mattress. Jim picked Denise up and began to carry her out of the room. I immediately called 911 in our suburb to report a lightning strike and fire. Although I didn't always have visibility, I saw Jim come out the front door and lay Denise on the ground about 30 feet from the front door. She was still naked. By then, the fire seemed to be spreading rapidly. Jim went upstairs again, and I saw him enter the boys' room. He took quite a long time in their bedroom, probably because they weren't very cooperative and didn't understand what was going on. He eventually walked out of their room carrying one of my sons in each arm, even as they screamed and flailed around. Jim was doing well until he reached the bottom of the stairs when Chet, although only 5 years old but the size of most 8-year-olds, took off. He jumped out of Jim's arms. Jim carried our other twin, Dirk, to where Denise lay and then returned for Chet, who was crawling up the stairs, completely dazed. By the time Jim grabbed Chet with both hands, the fire had spread more than I expected. The beam fell, hitting Jim in the shoulders and causing him to fall out of the front door as Chet flew out of his hands and onto the rain grass. Because I immediately called 911 and because the fire department was only 2 miles from our house, I saw the fire truck and ambulance arrive shortly after Jim fell, apparently unconscious, but at least stunned, at the front door. As soon as I saw the ambulance, I gathered up all the clothes I could easily grab, packed up my laptop, and ran out the door. I shouted my room number and the reason for my rush to the front desk manager as I flew past her, and she shouted back, "I'll take care of it." I called the fire department on the way home, luckily only an hour away. I found out the name of the hospital where the victims were sent. The idea that Denise might die had 2 consequences. It made me realize how much I loved her despite her cheating, as I couldn't imagine life without her. And that put me into Cool Bryce emergency mode. Instead of being overwhelmed, my mind was working as clearly as ever. During the hour's drive, I quickly, sharply, and rationally thought through in my mind what I would do in response to dozens of possible scenarios to deal with my family's health, as well as my Jim Denise problem. Luckily, when I got to the hospital, our neighbor, Sandy Moore, was there with Chet and Dirk. Neither of them were seriously injured. Flying to the ground was duck soup for a 5-year-old. But he was terrified. They were very happy to see me. I told them, "I'm going to check on Mom, and you stay here with Mrs. Moore." Denise was unconscious. The doctor was straightforward. "Your wife has a high probability of survival, about 90%. Unfortunately, her nervous system will be damaged, and there is about an 80% chance that the damage will be long-term. We'll know more about it by tomorrow morning, but it will probably be about 5 to 6 months before we know whether permanent nerve damage will occur." I held Denise's hand for a few minutes, called my sister to let her know what happened, asked Sandy Moore to take the kids to my sister's house after I kissed them deeply and told them Mommy would be okay, then walked over and half-held Denise some more. Holding her hand, I simultaneously begged her not to die and repeated my plan in my mind. I was sure in my heart that she would get better. I just felt it. and I promised her and myself that I would do everything possible to help her. I then went to visit Jim, who was on another floor of the same hospital. He suffered a serious, although not life-threatening, injury and was kept under observation overnight. I was told he would likely be fine in a couple of days. He was already conscious. Going into his room, I closed the door. "Jim, I want to sincerely thank you for saving the lives of my family members," I said as I walked up to him and shook his hand. I could tell he was scared. "I was glad I could help Bryce. I love your family too," he replied before he realized what he had said. "I know that, Jim. Since you saved my family, I approach the next topic completely differently than I would otherwise." "What's the next topic, Bryce?" "Your novel with Denise." "Where did you get such a wild idea?" I cut it off. "Stop it, Jim. I have a DVD of your date tonight." His eyes widened. He fell silent. "Listen to what I have to say, Jim. While I'm very grateful, I'm also angrier than I've ever been in my life. Angrier than I was at the party in Baghdad," I said with steely determination. "I blew up during a fight in Baghdad in college. I put 2 other guys in the hospital, and Jim had to put me in the hospital too." The comment, "Baghdad Brawl," caught his attention. "I bet you haven't called Gabriella yet because you had to figure out how to justify being at my house at 9:30 p.m. "You're right," he muttered, looking down. "I have a way to prevent the Italian tyrant, as you so disrespectfully called her tonight after having sex with my wife, from killing you." He looked like a drowning man, ready to clutch at any straw to save his life. "Here's how it's going to happen. I called you during my trip in a panic because I forgot about paying for the insurance. Denise didn't know where the appraisal was, which we did in my office, and I had a special safe with these documents. I gave you the combination and asked you to get them and fax or email them before morning. That's why you arrived just in time when the lightning struck." "Will you support this version?" Jim asked incredulously. "Yes. As soon as we're done, I'll call Gabriella myself and tell her the story. You tell her you can talk the insurance company into an extension due to the circumstances." "Okay," he replied, opening his eyes as wide as his condition would allow. "So you will become a hero, not a lover." He didn't answer this, just looked down. "After our first press appearance together, I will never have any contact with you again. You will have someone else in the office dealing with the aftermath of the fire. Other than 10 minutes with her, alone, as soon as she regains consciousness, you will not. You will, under no circumstances, speak to Denise until she has fully recovered from her injuries, probably 6 months. You will not return her calls. If she calls you, you will not contact her in person, by email, or in some other way. Got it?" Jim nodded, although more hesitantly than before. "If you keep contact with Denise, I will give Gabriella a copy of the DVD of your actions and words in my bedroom last night and tell her the whole truth." "I wonder what your father-in-law would do with this little thing?" I asked rhetorically. "Say, yes, I understand. No contact with Denise until she gets better." With a stutter indicating that he was aware that he had no choice, Jim repeated, "I understand that I must have no contact with Denise until she gets better or Gabriella gets the DVD. In 6 months, or when she gets better," I continued, "I'll give Denise a choice. She can stay married to me and move with me at least 1,000 miles to Spokane and never have contact with you again, or we get divorced, and she'll be able to do whatever she wants, including stalk you and ruin your marriage. So, if you really love her like you said on the DVD, you still have a chance to be with her. Got it?" After a long pause and with the strangest look in his eyes, one that I couldn't quite interpret, Jim replied, "I understand." "Okay, I'll call Gabriella." "One last thing, Bryce," said Jim. "How did you get here so quickly? I thought you were in Casper." "I was in Colorado Springs. I watched you live, and I was the one who called 911. If I hadn't done that, you could have died in a fire. You passed out on the front porch because the firefighters could. I won't be able to save you in time," I replied softly. Jim's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Everything went according to plan. I told Gabriella our story, and she arrived at the hospital within 20 minutes, hysterically excited to be with her hero. The next afternoon, the press lapped up the story as Jim and I gave a joint press conference outside the hospital, Gabriella and her daughters beaming before Jim's eyes. I talked about how grateful our family was that serendipity put Jim in the right place at the right time and how he had sprung into action. I couldn't see his reaction, but I'm willing to bet he wasn't smiling when I used the phrase, sprung into action. Luckily, Denise was conscious and sane on the morning of the press conference, although she would have to remain in the hospital for another week or so before starting rehab. So after the press conference, I pulled him aside. "Denise is conscious," I told him. "You have 10 minutes alone with her. Do not, I repeat, do not, tell her about the DVD and tell her that in light of what happened, it will be a while before you see her again. Understood?" "Got it," he replied grimly, and then walked away from his family. Jim returned about 15 minutes later, still gloomy. I closed my one-man consulting firm and Denise's event planning firm. I personally called each of our clients to explain the situation and thank them for their past cooperation. They all wished us good luck. The house was completely destroyed by lightning, fire, and water from rain and fire hoses. The only things that were salvaged were photo albums and children's books in a sturdy metal file cabinet in Denise's office, and all of our important documents and computer files that were on disks or other media in 2 fireproof safes in my office. Neither clothing, furniture, nor works of art have survived. Jim did a great job with the insurance, and one of his partners at the insurance agency was a real zealot for us. Between insurance payments for our home, personal property, and business losses, we received a full year's worth of income for each of our businesses, and the sale of our lot since we never intended to rebuild. We received over $1 million after taxes. For a short time, we rented a very nice furnished house near a park with all kinds of playgrounds and a large indoor swimming pool. I spent almost all my time helping Denise with rehabilitation or taking care of the children, or doing both. Denise's mom, her sister, and my sister each stayed with us twice a week to help. Denise could barely walk when she left the hospital and had gaps in her memory. Most of the nerve damage was from the waist down, although other parts of the body were also affected. Numerous therapy sessions with professionals were almost completely covered by the excellent health insurance that Jim provided us with. I took Denise to the pool almost every day as swimming really helped with her recovery, and we took the kids with us 2 days a week for swimming and diving lessons. Being around Denise all the time and meeting her needs, receiving her sincere hugs, kisses, and words of gratitude in return made me remember how much her nature and personality, along with her physical attractiveness, were the reason I loved her. I know Denise tried to call Jim several times, but he never answered or called back. On many occasions when we were alone, she would say, "Bryce, we need to talk about that night." But each time I would take her face in my hands, kiss her on the lips, and say, "I promise we'll talk as long as we can. You'll need it as soon as you get better, but not before. The doctors say you might go backwards." Of course, the doctors didn't say anything like that, and she probably knew it, but she didn't insist. Our friends, including Gabriella, who often brought us homemade treats and whose children played with ours, were also very supportive. Gabriella found it strange that Jim never accompanied them, but he always had his reasons, and she didn't insist. Denise's will to live, her restorative abilities, and all the loving care that I and everyone else put in worked wonders. Whatever the reason, we made love, tender, heartfelt love. We repeated this every 2 days after that until 6 months and 2 days after the lightning strike, she had what we hoped would be her final physical. Denise insisted that I be with her at the doctor's office. After an examination with appropriate mental, coordination, and physical tests that lasted more than 2 hours, we received excellent news. Except for some loss of strength and coordination in your legs, which may even return over the next few years, you have made a full recovery, the doctor said with a big smile. Denise's mom watched the kids while we were in the doctor's office and, of course, was just as excited as we were. Our whole family, including my sister and her husband and daughter, and Sandy Moore and her husband, went to celebrate. The celebration was even better when we got home, and Denise tried her best, successfully trying to please me sexually. While her mother was still at our rented house 2 days after our celebration, I told Denise that I was taking the children to my parents until she made a decision about something. "About what?" she asked. "I left you a letter on our bed. Read it when we get on the plane," I replied. Then the kids and I kissed her goodbye. Denise started to get upset as we were leaving, realizing what the letter might have been about. I didn't look back and encouraged the kids not to look back either. I sent a message to Jim, my only contact with him since the press conference, saying that he could talk to Denise or see her if he wanted. My letter read, "Dear Denise, I'm sorry to express this in the form of a letter, but I don't have the courage to talk to you face to face at the moment. Now that you've recovered, you have a choice to make. I accepted a job with a former client in Spokane, about an hour from your parents' house, to work full-time for them. The job pays about 60% of what I earned in my last year of consulting, but the conditions are good and there is virtually no travel. Plus, we still have over $1 million in the bank. I want you to come with me. I want you to tell me that you will go with me, that you love me and only me, and that you want to remain my wife and will be faithful from now on. If you decide to come with me, I will forget about your relationship with Jim. There is one but. You will never, under any circumstances, see or interact with him again once we leave for Spokane. If you don't want to come with me, I'll be hurt, but I'll understand. We will file for divorce due to irreconcilable differences and divide everything in half. I will seek sole custody, but I will not tarnish your reputation in the process. Another reason why I wrote with this letter is that I really want you to think about this for at least 48 hours. Please do not call me with your decision until 48 hours have passed after reading this letter and after you have spoken with Jim. But as soon as you make a decision after that, please call and we will get back to you right away. You don't need to tell me your decision before we meet. With hope and love, Bryce." I was on pins and needles within 24 hours. 30 hours after I thought she should have seen the letter, she called. "I know I shouldn't have called before the 48 hours were up, but I had to," she said, sobbing into the phone. "Why?" I asked sincerely. "Because I want you to know right now, not later," she sobbed into the phone, "that I desperately want to go with you and the boys to Spokane and be your loving, faithful wife forever. I love you, and only you. I do. I know that I need to seek your forgiveness and I have something to explain." I interrupted her. "There will be no explanation. When we get to Spokane, everything starts with a clean slate, and any past misdeeds are not only forgiven but forgotten. Have you met Jim?" "Yes, I dated. We talked for 2 hours and then kissed goodbye, never to see each other again. We'll be on the next flight. I'll send the details," I replied, and then ran to tell my parents the news, which was news to me but made no sense to them. A smiling but sobbing Denise and her mother met us at the airport in the middle of the night, about 6 hours after I ended our phone call. This was 3 years ago. Since then, I have had a perfect wife and family, life with 2 well-adjusted children, with their biological loving parents, and a completely loving home. Denise fully recovered from the lightning strike, and sex with her became the most passionate and incredible in our entire life together. I think my 2 experiences of infidelity, the last that will ever happen, helped me approach the problem of Jim and Denise rationally. I'm grateful every day for how I approached the situation, because I couldn't bear the thought of losing Denise. But I would never settle for anything less than a fully monogamous relationship. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.